Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
In recent times, I think many people would agree that Mizuno as a brand is one that knows their core consumer base better than anybody else, but is also a brand that has kind of played it safe. But once upon a time, they took risks. They did something that nobody else was doing. And what I have inside this box is the perfect representation of that era of Mizuno football boots, which for the record wasn't actually that long ago. Ladies and gentlemen, the return of the Wave Ignitus, specifically the Mizuno Wave Ignitus 4 in the made in Japan kangaroo leather upper variation, a football boot that originally came out back in late 2015, and Mizuno's answer to the, at the time, Adidas Predator and Nike T90 Laser series. And I'll be honest in saying that the Wave Ignitus 4 is not my favorite in the series. However, given that these are 7-year-old football boots, they've aged extremely well, and as you'd expect from any made in Japan Mizuno product, the build quality is exceptional. So what I want to do in today's video is do a brief little history lesson on the Wave Ignitus series, go over all the details of the now remake version of the Wave Ignitus 4, and talk about how these stack up against the current offerings from not just Mizuno, but from the bigger, more popular brands as well. Is this a power boot that makes sense in 2022? That's exactly what we're going to talk about, including how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, watch the entire review. And if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can get these limited edition boots below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And as always, guys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you don't miss out on brutally honest reviews of all the latest football boots of 2022. So first things first, I'd like to do a brief history lesson on the Wave Ignitus. In 2009, Mizuno launched the original Wave Ignitus, as seen here in yellow and black, which is actually the colorway inspiration for the Wave Ignitus 4 remake, because this wouldn't have been an original colorway for this boot. Nonetheless, this is a football boot with a kangaroo leather upper, rubber striking elements scattered throughout with almost like a tire tread pattern, the Mukaiten panel right here, and kind of an unusual spot for a striking zone. This was to promote a no-spin free kick, the knuckleball effect, if you will. It doesn't necessarily make you do the knuckleball, but if struck correctly, it could enhance that no-spin effect. A large external heel counter, and a super unique sole plate and stud pattern, actually a split sole construction where you have a forefoot plate and then a midfoot heel plate riveted together, carbon fiber running through the forefoot as well, and then one of the most unique FG stud patterns that kind of ran as a tradition throughout the Mizuno Wave Ignitus series, along with their wave tech through the heel. The Wave Ignitus 2 was more or less a refinement of the original, featuring the exact same sole plate and stud pattern, still having a kangaroo leather upper, but new striking elements that scattered a little bit more across the top of the foot because they moved the lacing system slightly to the outside to give you a little bit of a larger striking surface, and they even enlarged the Mukaiten panel that now runs right into the lacing system itself. Kind of the same overall experience, but maybe that little bit more refined. The Wave Ignitus 3 featured a more significant redesign, with the big change being the fact that the boot was no longer kangaroo leather, instead being replaced by a prime skin synthetic material that, quite honestly, just wasn't very good at the time. It's still not that great now. Mizuno does leather so well, there's no reason why this boot shouldn't have been leather. Nonetheless, you can see the rubber striking element had been changed quite significantly, a little bit less bulky, but equally as much grip. The Mukaiten panel enlarged once again, and then the sole plate and stud pattern being kind of more of a one-piece design, a little bit lighter, a little bit less bulky, but still maintaining that unique FG stud pattern along with the wave tech in the heel. And then finally in 2015, we got the Wave Ignitus 4, which would ultimately be the final model, and in my opinion, at least I would argue this, was the most watered down of the Wave Ignitus concepts. It reintroduced kangaroo leather, mainly on the outside of the forefoot, only on the made in Japan model. A slight refinement again to that striking element that I quite like the look and feel of, a little bit less bulky, but ditching the Mukaiten panel in favor of these 3 memory foam inserts that you definitely notice when struck on that area of the foot. But personally, I thought the Mukaiten panel was one of the coolest aspects of the Wave Ignitus, so it was a little bit sad to see it go. And then the sole plate and stud pattern from the Wave Ignitus 3 carried on to the 4th generation. Which brings us us to present day, where Mizuno have given us a remake of the Made in Japan Wave Ignitus 4, where again, if I'm being totally honest, I would have loved to have seen them remake the original or even the Wave Ignitus 2. Those were definitely my favorites out of the entire series. Nonetheless, what they've given us is a very true to the original remake with only two very minor differences, one of which is the grip texturing on the laces, where the laces themselves aren't quite chunky, and the silicone grips, you can feel it, but it's not necessarily something that I think benefits the performance or feel of the boot in any way. Just a gimmicky element. I'm not sure why they did that. And then the heel liner, I would actually say is an improvement over the original, where it's just a little bit of a softer suede versus a slightly more microfiber-like material that was seen on the OG. Everything else is identical, and for a football boot that is 7 years old, they have aged extremely well. So first things first, I want to talk about the weight, because I think one of the reasons why power boots fell out of favor with the average consumer was this obsession around boots getting thinner and lighter, and I think this had this perception of being bulky and heavy, which it's not. So for the sake of comparison, in a size 9.5 US, we're going to take this Made in Japan Wave Ignitus 4 remake and compare it to the latest and greatest from the Adidas brand, technically a control boot now, but kind of a similar concept with rubber elements scattered across the upper, the Predator Edge Plus, also in a 9.5 US. We'll start off with the Predator Edge, we'll throw it on the scale, and you can see that they weigh in at 9.45 ounces, the equivalent of 268 grams, not particularly lightweight for a football boot in 2022. And we'll take the Wave Ignitus 4, again, a remake of a football boot that came out 7 years ago, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.2 ounces, the equivalent of 231 grams, which again is not incredibly lightweight, but it's only about an ounce off what you're going to find from some speed boots from major brands right now. Long story short, these are far from heavy. As for the touch, feel, and materials used on the Wave Ignitus 4, it's safe to say that they don't make football boots like this anymore, mainly because you have so many different types of materials and elements that have kind of been stitched together to create an upper, where nowadays pretty much everything is a one-piece material with some added on elements. You can see you have kangaroo leather here, kind of on the lateral side of the forefoot. So from this seam across the front of the toe box forefoot area, running until basically the front side of the Mizuno Runbird logo, that area is kangaroo leather. So it's actually quite a small amount of leather on the Wave Ignitus 4. Again, part of the reason why I was a much bigger fan of the Wave Ignitus 1 and 2. Everything else is a bunch of different synthetic materials. So you have a synthetic leather running through the midfoot, a Runbird logo stitched on top of that, another seam right here at the back of the heel that flows into this section where you have those memory foam inserts. Then you have another section of synthetic topped by this rubber material in the striking area of the foot, basically on the medial side of the forefoot and toe box area. And then it's all stitched together right here at the front, which is a seam that I would argue is a little bit awkward, and you do feel it with the boots on feet, although it's not as uncomfortable or as stiff as you perhaps might expect it to be. It's just, I guess, noticeable enough to where you can feel it, but not to the point where it's detrimental to the comfort. You're also going to notice an off-center lacing system with a standalone tongue, not a one-piece upper, and that tongue material is a synthetic microfiber with some memory foam inserts that actually feels quite good. Given that breakdown of all the different materials that have been stitched together and layered on top of each other, you might expect this to be a pretty bulky football boot in terms of touch and feel, and surprisingly it's not. Like I mentioned earlier, it's aged quite well. The rubber striking element spans pretty much, I would say, the parts of your foot that you would want it to cover in terms of giving you that kind of powerful additional grip feel for the ball, and the material that they've used as a synthetic base underneath the leather is surprisingly pliable and just the perfect thickness to give you that pingy sensation during a strike without feeling overly padded or anything like that. The memory foam pads here, I just don't think are all that noticeable. It's a firmer memory foam than I think you might expect, and to me, it's just one of the most lackluster elements we've ever seen on a Wave Ignitus model. Again, part of the reason why the Wave Ignitus 4 is not my favorite in the series. I'll also mention that the kangaroo leather on the lateral side of the forefoot feels extremely soft. The quality is amazing, but it's such a small amount of kangaroo leather that you're really only feeling that softness kind of on the lateral side of your forefoot. To me, one of the elements of this football boot that does still bother me is that connection point here at the tip of the toe, where you do feel that little bit of a stiffness in transition between this super soft leather and what is just a much firmer, rubber material. What is nice, however, about this rubber material, kind of bordering the edge of where the upper attaches to the sole plate, is the durability. This is a very strong bond between rubber and plastic, and obviously the glue that holds it together, not to mention the two rivets you have at the tip of the toe. So given that these are very expensive football boots, if you do plan on playing in them, expect them to last a very long time. Durability is not just a strong suit with made in Japan Mizuno models in general, but with this particular design and these materials used, you can expect these boots to hold up extremely well. But in terms of actual performance from the rubber striking element, the logical comparison would be the Predator Edge, and while this provides nowhere near the amount of grip as the Predator elements found on that Predator Edge model, there still is more additional grip on these than just about any other football boot outside of the Predator range. And again, in comparison to the Preds, these are infinitely more comfortable, fit so much better, and honestly are just a much more pleasant experience. It really is, again, despite being 7 years old, a modern power boot experience. Moving to the rear, you're going to find a large external plastic heel counter that was kind of a signature of the Wave Ignitus line, a low-cut construction with a little bit of an extended back. Some people did complain back in the day that this kind of rubbed into the back of their Achilles tendon. I personally never had that issue with these, but it is something to be aware of. You have a microfiber lining material, kind of like a suede that's super soft, does a nice job of gripping your socks, and in general, just feels quite comfortable. Despite Mizuno not really putting a ton of extra padding in there, they tend to get their shaping just right, and these feel no different. Then the insole is a one-to-one remake of the original, which I would argue is a little bit cheap by today's standards, but it's kind of cool that it's exactly the same as it was. It's a mesh liner on top, made from a single layer of what is relatively thin black foam with a little bit of a blue additional foam insert in the heel for some extra cushion. Moving to the base of the boot, you're going to find that they've gone for this all black coloring, which I think doesn't really do this sole plate justice. It almost makes it look a little bit cheap, so I think that was maybe a bit of a cost-cutting measure by Mizuno in regards to not using a second color to kind of highlight some of the interesting details of this sole plate. Nonetheless, you are going to find that it's got nice flexibility to it while still feeling quite solid. And of course, one of the signatures of the Wave Ignitus line, it's in the name, is the wave tech through the heel, which is, as you can see, this kind of wave that flows with the two back heel studs on either side. Wave Tech is one of Mizuno's signature kind of cushion but also stability technologies, and it's always been questionable to me on all the Wave Ignitus models how much of an effect this actually has. I can't say that it feels like there's underfoot cushioning in the heel of these football boots, but it does feel quite good. That's all I can say. Whether or not this is actually effective though, I guess that is down to personal opinion. In my opinion, it's not doing much of anything. And then as far as the FG stud pattern is concerned, the Wave Ignitus series always had these very unique kind of longer style studs that provide really good traction, but I think more than anything do an excellent job of distributing pressure underneath your feet. So if you're somebody that always struggled with, I guess, stud pressure issues or even playing on slightly harder ground, because of these longer studs that have a very large surface area, while they don't necessarily dig in super deep, they feel really, really stable and also extremely comfortable underfoot. And honestly, the traction is quite aggressive as well. One complaint I would argue though is that the studs at the very front do sit pretty far back from the tip of the toe. So if you're somebody that tends to push off on the very tip of your toe, you may find yourself slipping a little bit more than you otherwise would in some other options. Otherwise though, I love this stud pattern, and honestly, there isn't really anything else out there that I can compare this to right now. Super unique and, in my opinion, a great performer. On feet, as you'd expect from a made in Japan Mizuno product, the Wave Ignitus 4 fits and feels extremely comfortable. The kangaroo leather on the lateral side of the forefoot is top notch, although there isn't a ton of leather on this football boot. That's definitely not the predominant material. It is mostly synthetic, and the synthetic they've used actually feels a little bit softer than what the original had. I had those on my feet a little bit earlier just for the sake of comparison, and these feel that much better. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe it's just a slightly better synthetic now that we are 7 years later, but nonetheless, they're really, really comfortable. My only complaint would be, and it was the same with the original, is that you can feel the transition from kangaroo leather to this synthetic rubber material at the tip of the toe. Not to the point where it's uncomfortable, but it's just blatantly obvious that that's really soft and that's not quite as soft. Nonetheless, the boots fit well. They're super comfortable. I love the nice deep lacing system. It allows for plenty of adjustability. And again, despite having the look of kind of like a chunkier power boot, they feel quite slim on your feet and honestly, nice and lightweight, very secure, super responsive. They're just not much to complain about here. And again, the feel of this sole plate underfoot is just incredibly comfortable. One of the best currently on the market if we're comparing this to current day football boots. As far as width is concerned, these have plenty of width to them, so even if you did have wider feet, these are gonna fit just about everybody. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and length is perfect. So if you're looking to order a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, while I am a little bit disappointed that Mizuno didn't go all the way back to 2009 and remake the original Wave Ignitus, I think what they've given us here in this Wave Ignitus 4 remake is still a really impressive football boot to the quality standard we expect from made in Japan Mizuno products, and honestly, something that is super unique in today's current football boot market. And I know this is a limited edition release that's going to be sold out sooner rather than later, but if we're talking about this as a current model in the current landscape of power and control boots, if you will, this is by far the best one, despite it being a 7-year-old design. They're worth the price in my opinion, and given the choice between all the crazy Mizuno products we've had over the years, I'm not necessarily sure I would pick these over something like a Wave Cup Legend or even the Morelia Wave. I think those are excellent football boots that are maybe a little bit more refined than this, but at the same time, I'd be happy to wear these, being a big fan of the Wave Ignitus series, and honestly, old Predators and T90 Laser models, this is right up my alley, and for the time being, will be my go-to football boots.